welcome back to our vlog. Today we are going to get back into the adoption world a little bit more. If this is your first time on our vlog, we cover things adoption or just what's going on in life. This week we do get to talk more about adoption. We're in the process of adopting from China, and we have a super awesome opportunity to interview some great friends of ours. They're super sweet people. They've known me since I was very little, like probably 8 years old, 7 years old. They've known me a long time. And this couple in the past, they adopted both domestically and internationally. So we're gonna meet them for lunch at a state park, have a little picnic, kind of pick their brains on what their adoption processes were like, and hopefully get you guys some valuable information that you can use toward your adoption journeys. So let's go, guys. So there's a tiny little cemetery right there. Kind of weird. Right next to the picnic table where we might eat lunch. To the memory of Mary E. Ford, daughter of Elijah Elizabeth Ford, who departed this life December 5th, 1818, aged 3 months, 29 days. Hi friends! We are here with our wonderful friends, Mr. John and Miss Brenda. They have known me for more years than I would like to admit. It's been a while.
We changed her diaper.
Oh!
No, not that far.
They babysat me. They babysat me. But we are so thankful that they have agreed to let us pick their brains today. They have gotten the gift of going through both the domestic adoption process and the international adoption process. And they have two beautiful daughters through those processes. So today we're going to talk to them a little bit about their beautiful girls and a little bit about what it took to get to that point of building their family. So, how old are your girls now? Tell us a little bit about them.
Okay, our Chinese daughter, her name is Michelle, and she is 19 years old. And Amanda is 22, and she is our domestic adoption from Florida.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, because every adoption process, especially domestically, is quite different depending on the state that you live in, right?
Yes.
The experiences that they're going to be sharing are based off of the Florida domestic adoption system.
Yeah.
To kind of let our friends know a little bit of your background process, let's focus first on your domestic adoption, because that's where you guys started, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about Amanda then. How long, first of all, did that adoption process take from the domestic side?
So from like the decision of like, hey, I think we're gonna adopt, to
Bringing her home.
When we were talking about it, because it's been a number of years since we did this, that we figured that Amanda's took about a year for us to go through the whole process. We went through the Catholic Social Services. We're not Catholic ourselves, but we joined their program. They had a very low price, which we thought was affordable for us.
Right.
The program seemed very good. We'd been married for 10 years, not able to have kids. We might have gotten something earlier if I had been ready earlier.
Right.
To adopt it. It was 10 years into it when I decided, I was ready to do that.
And I know that kind of corresponds with our story as well. Like, we waited about 10 years before starting to have kids. And so then it was probably 11 years before we realized, like, okay, we can't have children. It's time to pursue something else. So I think our timelines are kind of similar in that, which is interesting.
And when we started looking into adoptions through agencies and attorneys, I think with lawyers, like we found that there was maybe more of a risk of investing in a situation, and still more of a chance that that final decision would she would decide, oh, I want it.
Oh,
But we've already taken care of the medical needs for her and all. Whereas when you go, at least the agency that we went through, we did not even know that we had been chosen by the birth parents until she was almost ready to be born.
Wow.
So there was a lot lower risk to ourselves emotionally, and we, our adoption was the most open that they were doing at the time. So Amanda's was pretty open, the first one that they had done to that degree.
So that's a little bit about your experience with the domestic side.
Yes.
Now, domestic and international processes are quite different,
Yes.
right? Okay, let's talk a little bit about your international adoption experience. Obviously, that was several years ago, so it has changed a little bit. But what was your timeline? How old was she when you brought her home? Let's kind of talk about that.
The process was a little bit longer. I think we figured it was about 2 years between the time we started and the time we actually went over to China to get her. The process did take longer, a lot more paperwork, and about 3 times more expensive.
Really? Wow.
As you all know, with the medical things, it's dotting the I's, it's crossing the T's, everything has to be just a certain way.
Right.
Because if it gets there, they don't like it, they'll send it back. You got to go do it again until they're, you get it to their specifications.
And a certain timetable too. There were a few times when our timetable ran out, we had to go renew the paperwork because it had fallen out of time.
So it definitely makes it take longer when you're dealing with that. And then how old was Michelle when you were able to go and pick her up in China? Mom's turn.
Picked her up in China. She was 16 months old. She was born in September of the year before, and we went in January.
Wow, so she was little.
She was little. She was about the size of 6 to 9 months old, of which we figured out that she battled with, she was malnourished.
Oh, yeah.
And of course her teeth then took its toll on that. So she went through some physical challenges at first.
Okay, so that was kind of specific about each of them. Let's do a little bit of a more general question.
All right, so I'm going to ask a question. How did you prepare yourselves mentally and spiritually to welcome your child home? Reading material, taking classes, finding other adoptive families, or whatever it is that you...
Okay, well, for Amanda, through the agency, there were parenting classes that we had to take. And of course, spiritually, we had to get ourselves ready to be willing to adopt, and surrender the right to be able to have our own baby. I know a lot of people wonder if they could ever love them, the way that they would love their own child, but trust me,
Yes.
when you're with them and you're holding them for the first time, everything in you will just bond. And you will definitely love them just as if you had given
will
birth
be
to
your
them.
child.
Right. It happens. Yeah. It's a magical thing. But for Michelle, it was definitely a different spiritual journey that God put us on. Because I think the biggest question that I wrestled with was, how do I take this little girl and you tell them that they were abandoned?
Oh, yeah.
And then rescued, and here they are in your home. And how do you get them to understand that?
Yeah, it was during one of those trying times when we were trying to figure out, is this really what the Lord wants to do? And I don't remember the exact circumstances, but I was doing dishes, and yes, men do dishes.
Yes.
He's good at that.
And talking to the Lord, and the Lord just suddenly hit me with the fact that Moses was adopted. And Moses God used Moses to bring them to the Lord,
Right.
basically. And it just hit me so strongly that maybe what the Lord's trying to tell me is that's what he wants to do with Michelle. And so that's part of why I just had such a very strong sense that this is what the Lord wants us to do. We got our first picture of Michelle. We saw her birthday. Her birthday is our wedding.
Oh, no way.
He said,
Yeah.
there's the Lord's stamp right there that this child is
This is
for
her,
us.
his little girl for us.
So, how did you talk to your two daughters about their adoption in a healthy way? How did this change in the teen years versus the earlier years, or anything that you'd like to share with that?
Well, with Amanda, the domestic adoption, the first one, I grew up with a younger sister that was adopted back in those ancient times.
No, not easy.
They kept quiet about the fact that they were adopted. But what they told us in the classes that we went through with the domestic adoption was tell them right up front at the very beginning that they're adopted. And that way they're accepting it from when they're a little kid and it's just a natural process. We thought that was great advice.
Yeah.
And what we found was that over the years, like when they were playing dolls or whatever, they talked about wanting more kids. They would just go to the adoption agency and get another child. So it was a
That's so
natural thing for them. So that was a great advice for that.
I think of course, when Michelle came, we did the very, very same thing. But we had to help her understand, especially as Amanda got older and she could ask us questions. Who are my birth parents and where do they live and all of that. We had pictures that we could one day show her. Well, there were a lot of those pieces of Michelle's puzzle that weren't going to be filled in.
Right.
So we just had to help her understand and accept that that same scenario won't be able to happen in her situation. But we turned her eyes to a lot of the family and people that meant a lot in our lives that loved her.
Blessing also, and again, you can't guarantee this for other families,
Right.
but the birth father for Amanda, the birth father and his mother, and especially his mother, kept in contact with us throughout the years before they were reintroduced. They recognized that Michelle wasn't going to have that kind of,
Wow.
and so they just made her part of the
They would
family
send her
too.
little gifts on
That
her
is
birthday.
really
Oh,
special.
all of
Oh,
that.
that's so sweet.
That is very
Yeah.
cool.
And that's the Lord's blessing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. That Amanda's birth father would also recognize that she had a sister now. And
Right, yeah.
that is really cool. Okay. So, we have notes here. That's why we keep looking down. It's not that the tablecloth is beautiful, but there's also
Yes.
notes here. So, how? I'm just staring off into space, you know. How did you help the bonding process along with each of the girls when you brought them home? Or was there more of like a bonding process with one more than the other?
Well, I definitely think because of their ages when we got them, Amanda was 3 days old. So, that whole bonding and loving and forming relationship and connection with her was just normal,
Right.
natural. It
was
happened
all-
as she got up, grew.
It was almost like we had the baby and brought her home type thing because she was so young.
Right.
You know?
Yeah,
Late
so
night
it was
feedings and all
all
that.
that
yeah.
good
Oh,
stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Michelle, the days that she was with us, she was very closed up, whereas a lot of the other ones were forming bonds and communication with them in the way that they can at that age. So there wasn't a lot of feedback she was giving us, not a lot of communication, emotional.
She didn't know our language either.
Yeah.
Right.
We could tell even
But
as
the
young
other
as she
ones were,
was,
though, so.
as young as she was, we could tell when she was being spoken to in Chinese because we had Chinese people with us to take us around to different places.
Yeah.
That she understood them,
Okay.
but she didn't know English.
Right.
Although I have to say she's a very smart kid, and it didn't take her long
picked it
before
up.
she picked it up.
And it was really towards almost up to the last day before they were going to do that she finally looked at us and smiled and giggled.
Wow.
And then it was like just watching this little flower open up,
Oh man.
you know, and it was so different from then on.
We had a cool experience. There were like 10 families that went over at the same time. There was one time we were together in a room at the hotel, and one of the kids, the kids just crawled around before. One of them stood up for the first time and walked around, and then another one did the same thing.
Oh wow.
And so they started doing it, and I think Michelle was one of those that ended up doing that as well.
Wow.
That the stimulation plus maybe being with the families long enough that they felt they could do this, that they started responding.
The more
like that.
comfortable they became,
Right.
then the more that you could actually see what they could do,
Wow.
you know, and they would interact with you.
That's incredible. Just kind of getting to watch them like blossom over that little bit of time.
It really was an amazing thing to watch.
Part of what she wanted also was Michelle wouldn't sleep by herself. She had to like put her on her chest, and she would fall asleep that way. She didn't get a whole lot of sleep herself.
From underneath her.
Right.
She'd
wake
right
up.
back.
She wanted to make sure you were still there and you weren't leaving. And oh wow. So that probably actually really helped a lot with the bonding.
I
then.
think so.
I would
It
think.
made her feel secure.
So, would you recommend if you're going to adopt internationally? This is a question that was not prepared.
Oh dear. Okay.
Oh, no.
We're springing this on you.
So, would you recommend if you're going to adopt internationally that, I mean, as far as learning the language of that culture, is it? I mean, of course, I guess it would be worth it, but would it be? How much of that, if you were looking back, you would have been like, oh, let me go ahead and start learning Mandarin a year beforehand or something? Was that a big deal to learn the native language, or not really? Or maybe when they're younger.
We didn't. Now, as far as us learning the language, or them learning the language?
So that we could communicate with her when
Yeah,
we got
so
her.
parents learning the language.
Yeah, we didn't even think about learning the language. We did read material to learn about the culture.
But it was amazing to us, like how quickly, like even though she didn't speak the language, she started understanding our language in English so quickly.
Wow.
And you can tell by the expression on their face and everything
Yeah.
whether they're tracking with you or not.
Wow.
For our final question, if you could offer advice to a family going through the adoption process, either way, domestic, international, or just in general,
Or both.
what would it be if they were sitting in front of you and you're like, we just need to tell you this?
One of the things that entered my mind was obviously these little people do not share our DNA, but these little people have all of the same things that make them up. Their human nature, their talents, their gifts, their abilities. You know, you don't need a manual to understand. Now, even though they will not share your DNA, it is amazing over the years to watch them adapt some of your characteristics.
Yeah.
And some of your abilities, and some of your quirks, and some of your, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
And I think I would just encourage you to just take the time, invest the time in getting to know who they are, and then raise them as unique individuals.
there are differences that are coming into it, and you're going to have to learn to deal with that. But that stretches you as well, makes you a stronger person,
Right.
and all that as a result of going through that.
And you'll learn so much.
Whatever you go through, that you do it with a reliance on the Lord, and the
As a
Lord,
team.
as a team, and the Lord will use that not only to help them to grow, but it will also help you to grow as a person as well.
Well, thank you guys again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This was
Thanks
wonderful.
for asking us.
This was great. And hopefully this will be helpful to some of you out there. If you guys have further questions, go on ahead and leave them down in the details below, and we'll try to field them, or we will email them to John and Brenda, and we will do our best to get you the answers to your questions.
And we're going to show you behind the camera, there's actually a lake. So there's some crazy boats that came by.
There's a river.
Yeah, we'll show you real quick.
A river that was completely quiet before we started filming.
That's right.
And then it
Surprise.
literally erupted after we did. It's great.
All right, so here's the, as we're talking, there we go. See ya.
Bye. Kind of concludes our adventure for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned a little something. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, and the adventure continues. Bye guys. Have y'all noticed all the noise since I started filming? There's been like 3 boats, there's been a jet, there's been like 2 cars. It was totally quiet before I started filming. I'm like, what in the world, guys?
Of course.
Everybody-
Out in the little miniature one.
I don't want to know what it's a miniature
Oh, wait,
one of.
never mind. It's just a brand. I thought it was a little mini inchworm.